Bryan Brown, welcome to Booktopia. Thank you for joining us today.
Pleasure. Thanks, Mark, for asking me.
No worries. Can you start off by telling us a little bit about Sweet Jimmy?
Well, Sweet Jimmy is a book, and it's a book that I wrote, and it has 7 stories in it. And one of the stories is called Sweet Jimmy, the last story, in fact. But they're all stories that are in the crime genre, and a lot of them are about how young fellas end up in crime. Um, sort of memories I have of moments when people made decisions that could be very bad decisions and made me think, I wonder what happened to that man or woman. Um,
How
yeah.
how long have you been writing short stories?
Well, it's unusual because I wrote one of the stories called Nightmare. I wrote that 35 years ago when I was in America, and I wrote it as a pitch for a movie. But I started to write it, and I found myself continuing to write it as I was sort of getting involved in what was happening to this couple, and I was quite enjoying, with the ideas that were coming up, and and then I finished it, and that was 35 years ago. I never used it for a movie, and then when about 3 or 4 years ago, I started to write another story. It was called A Time to Do, and it was based on I was watching television. And I saw these people having a celebratory dinner in Hong Kong, and none of them knew each other. And they just got out of jail, and the judge had said, "You're not drug mules, you're stupid." And it was about people getting caught in scams and eventually carrying things that they didn't know they were carrying. And I was watching that, and I thought, Jesus, if that was me, I'd have to find out who was behind this. And then I thought, that's not a bad premise for a TV series. So I started to write it once again as a pitch, but it kept going and going, and the story kept going. And I thought, I want to see where this story's going. And then eventually I had a 13,500 word story, and I went, well, I've got the story. Some people read it and said they liked it, and that sort of got me over the last couple of years. Just when I'd get an idea about something, I'd start to write about it and see where it'd take me. And then eventually I had 6 stories, and Richard Walsh read them and said, look, I think Alan Unwin would like to publish these. What do you say? And I went, well, fine. So then I thought, I've got another story, and that's Sweet Jimmy, the last story. So I wrote that in.
Fantastic. Yeah, I have to say, reading Nightmare, that the first thing that I thought after reading it was that it feels like it's an outline for a film, like
Yeah,
very entertaining, thrilling one.
I think sort of possibly the way I write is filmic, is like they're all story. If you look at them, you sort of think, yeah, I could see that as a art house movie, or I could see that as an action movie, or I could see that as a series. There's one set in Campbelltown that I go, all those characters would be great to have in an 8-hour series or something.
Yeah. So you wrote the 7 stories. Were there any that you were kind of working on that didn't make the cut?
No, they all got their way in there. Let's get it right. I may only be capable of 7. We just don't know, it is one of those numbers in the universe, isn't it? No, I sort of, by the time I knew I had to do another one after I had the 6 there, I thought, no, it needs another story. And I knew what I wanted to, what the next story needed to be, which was actually Sweet Jimmy.
What is it about writing crime stories? And all these stories seem to have a revenge kind of angle to them as well. What is it about writing crime and revenge that you think attracts you?
Well, I read a lot of crime. I love reading crime. And I think it's big. People buy them all over the world. It's exotic. And also it's a world that we hope to Christ we're never going to be involved in. So it's great to look at it from afar, and I guess it's because we look and go, eventually we go, how did someone make that decision to do that? They're different to us. But, my take on all this stuff is that they're not really different to us. They've made choices that are different to us, but they're the same. They're another human being. They have pain, they have hopes, they have joys, but sometimes some of them don't have a safety net where they start to make a bit of a mistake and there's no one there to say, whoa, hold on, this could lead to a bad place. Most of us have that someone. Usually it's a parent. So you know, like, and so crime is a bigger, and I read a lot of crime. But the other thing I really like about crime is that, you know, take two in particular, Ian Rankin's Rebus and Henning Mankell's Wallander. You know, with Rebus, I can almost smell Edinburgh. I can feel I know Edinburgh because of the way Ian Rankin writes his character in that town. And the same with Mankell in Malmo in Sweden. I feel I can smell Malmo. And, you know, like, I really know Sydney. I've lived in it for a long, long time. I grew up in the suburbs for a long, long time. I lived on the northern beaches. I surfed Cronulla. I hitched from Beverly Hills to Cronulla after I'd got the train from Panania. I've sat on the icebergs having a beer and eating fish and chips. I've looked at that beautiful beach and the shape of it. You know, I go to the Blue Mountains. I know Sydney. Before all the freeways got in and everything, I know every back street and how to get by and how to get around. And I as I tell these stories, I realise I'm telling Sydney, you know, and I hope people that don't know Sydney will just get a sniff of Sydney out of it. And those that do go, oh, I know that. Oh, I know what he's talking about.
Yeah, I definitely had that reaction reading the stories. You know, I grew up in Western Sydney as well, and so, you know, I'm very well acquainted with Campbelltown, and the way that you bring places like that to life. Really, you know, I kind of thought that Sydney almost becomes a character in the stories as well. How do you go about kind of actually bringing that out through the stories?
Well, I think that I let the characters take me there. I mean, the one set in Campbelltown, and I really love the fact that it's set in Campbelltown. It's a bloody big place, Campbelltown. You know, there's a lot of people live out there. And, you know, a lot of great people live out there. They've gone on to do loads of things. But there's some bad buggers there too. So let's talk about the bad buggers. I sort of like that story was a funny thing. I'm driving along in my car and I'm thinking, what if Sam Neill was a thief? You know, well, you know, he's not. I mean, he's too bumbling and old to bloody be a thief. He'd be in jail the first thing he'd make a mistake on. But I suddenly had in my head this thing, Sam the thief. Just the word, Sam the thief. And so I started just sort of driving the car going, you know, Sam was a thief. He'd always been a thief, you know. And so suddenly I had the tack. Okay, that's who he is. I know who this little Sam is. I know this little fella. He's like a bunch of fellas I grew up with. You know, and let's let Sam take me on a journey. So I just start, you know, one finger after another, and Sam took me on this journey all the way through Campbelltown.
Have you ever considered writing outside of the world of crime?
That's a good question, and the answer is no at the moment. No, because I don't. You know, look, my daughter was asked the other day, oh, do you think your dad's going to be an author now? And she said, no, I don't think Dad thinks like that. Like, he's a storyteller. He has been for 50 years. You know, I produce movies as well as acting, and everything about my life's been involved with bloody stories. You know, I haven't done a actually useful thing at any time in my life. You know, I've just been out there bloody saying, hey, you're never going to believe what happened to so-and-so, whether it be on screen or on film or whatever. And as she said, this is just another form. He woke up one day and went, I better write down this story. And so she's sort of right. You know, that's what's there at the moment. They're stories I've invented. Will I invent others? Well, I probably can, but whether I do or whatever, I enjoyed writing these characters. That's what I enjoyed pursuing blokes like Sam, the thief. I wanted to know him. You know, I wanted to know what trouble he was going to get into. So, you know, I like sort of thinking up characters and see where they take. And my whole life's been characters. You know, someone gives me a piece of paper and says, make it real.
Yeah. Do you think that was an advantage for you coming into writing these stories? The fact that you've spent, you know, 4 decades inhabiting characters, does that make kind of creating these characters who are quite vivid and really pop off the page? Does that make it easier for you?
No, but I think it's what I like. You know, I like playing characters. You know, I like it when someone gives me a and I go, yeah, I know it. I can pull that glove on. And I think it's the same, you know, like I'm character led. So my stories aren't going to be about, it was a dark and moody night. The half moon shone through the top of the house with the skylight, and then he pulled out the gun and shot him. I just go, he pulled out the gun and shot him. So it's the character, what he does. That's what interests me.
Yeah. You've talked a little bit about some of the inspiration behind a couple of the stories. What would you say is your main source of inspiration for these? Is it mainly inspired by real life cases?
I think it's two things. I think one is it's the chance to be imaginative. It's the chance to just run free creatively and let my imagination go. But the other thing is where I decide to take my imagination, it's got things around it based, holding it there on what I know about life and what I've come across and stumbled across and seen, particularly in the early years of growing up, those early years up to say 30. They were very, those years made me the bloke I am. That's where I learned about life, where that's where I learned, like, if you want to get out of trouble here, you better have a good bloody joke to get the bloke laughing and let you go. Or, that's why I learned about how you got to survive. And so I think I go back to that sort of my inspiration, my imagination running, but what I've known, what I learned up to the age of 30 about life.
Yeah. Is there a story in the collection that is your personal favorite?
I really like Vigilante, and the reason I like it is because I really like Ahmed. Yeah. I think Ahmed is a really, really interesting, good guy.
Yeah, that one almost reads like almost like a Batman origin story.
Yeah, it's like I just really like Ahmed.
What is your writing process like?
Well, I get an idea and then I go, oh, what time is it? 3:30. Oh, I'll go and sit down and scribble. Let's have a go at that thing I was thinking about. And then, once I start, and I said, look, everyone writes different. I've just been watching the Hemingway documentary, and every writer in there seems to write a different way, and that makes sense to me. I come up with a character and then I start. And once I start, the character goes running. It's running, and so it's taking me so. And then I might finish with that character and go, we've got to go to another bloke that's going to be in this story. Who will that be? I know who that be, and then that'll run, and then another one will run, and then somewhere they all start to converge and take me to what's going to be what the theme and the whole resolution's going to be. So, yeah, I don't know where the story's going. I don't know. I don't go, I want to tell a story about a thief. I want to tell a story about a man whose daughter dies. I want to tell a story about a bloke who looks at the TV, a bloke who's just got out of jail because he got caught for drugs and it wasn't him that did it. I want to tell, so I know what I want to tell a story of, but I haven't got a clue what the story is until I start writing it.
Do you think that there's a difference in approach between writing for a book or writing a short story and writing for film?
Well, I have been lucky in the last 40 odd years, and let me tell you, I've only just realised this. I've only just realised that basically my life's been about telling stories. Sure, I'm an actor, but I'm part of the jigsaw puzzle in a story, and then they hand it to me, and how do I make that? What am I going to do with that bloke that fits that story? And I work with writers because I produce ideas as to what the hell the story is, and rip those 18 pages out. They're useless. Let's start again on that part of it. So that game of getting a story right, I've been involved with for a long, long time. And I think that I now sort of naturally understand it. I naturally understand what a story's got to be, what it's going to be to start with. I have no idea, but once I get going, I know it's got to have a middle and it's got to have an end. Somewhere, Brian, you've got to deliver, but and so that's sort of how it all works.
I wanted to ask about the way that you write the dialogue in these stories, because it's very economical in that you don't really waste any words, but it comes across as very convincing and realistic for how, you know, a thief in Campbelltown would talk. How do you approach writing realistic dialogue for characters like this?
I can hear the character talking. You know, I just hear him and put it down. You know, I don't think what's he going to say. It just sort of starts to go. He says that and he says that. I know he's going to repeat it and he's going to repeat it and he's going to think that and he's going to think that. So as I say, you know, I come up with a character, and in so doing, for some reason, I know the character. I know once he starts going, I know how he speaks. I know what he's going to say. Yeah. And it's just, I guess they're the, you know, that's just my instinct. I trust my instinct, you know.
Do you think that there's more books in you?
Well, it's a really good question. And part of me goes, you know, I would like that to be the case. The other part of me goes, oh, for Christ's sake, do I really want to? I mean, I'm about to shoot an 8-hour series. Look, I'm incredibly grateful that I've actually written these and actually someone wants to publish them. And if they give people, entertain people, I'm really pleased with it. If I could come up with a story and more stories, yeah, I'd like to put them down. But it's going to be the same way that this happens. It's not like, okay, it's time to start writing. It will come to me something, and I'll go home and I'll go, I'm going to get started on that. So I think it would be nice if I could do another one. Then I'm not just, you know, a one book wonder, you know, one book, you know, wonder. I wonder if anyone likes it. But you know, like, it would be nice to think that I was capable of doing more than just that. You know, we'll see.
Well, as a reader, I have to say something that really stands out is that the characters are so interesting, and a lot of the situations that you put them in and the setups, it feels like there's room for more. You could definitely revisit. Just throwing it out there for you.
All right, you've convinced me. I'm off. I'll start tonight.
And I wanted to ask you an off-book topic question, but you're an ambassador for the Sydney-based literacy foundation, Westwords. Can you tell us a little bit about Westwords and their upcoming fundraiser, Booktopia?
Well, they're an organisation that, you know, that promotes and writing in the western suburbs, the writing, reading, and telling stories. From young men and women growing up in the western suburbs of Sydney. It's called Westwords. I've been out a couple of times to watch them at work. I went to a Parramatta High School, Parramatta Primary School there one day, where after school the kids all came in, the parents that wanted those kids to be involved, and you know, I actually. And these were kids that probably hardly ever read a book, and you could just see how much they were loving this opportunity. It was almost like, oh, thank God school's over. We got this reading, writing. I can get up and tell your story. Up they get and tell their story. I found it really pretty bloody inspirational to see, and it's great to see such an organisation. You know, it also sets up, you know, literacy programs where they bring in writers to work with, not just, you know, 9 and 10-year-olds, but 15, 16, 17-year-old kids that have got a lot to say. You know, they come from all different cultures in western suburbs of Sydney. They're carrying stuff. Their parents are carrying stuff. They've got all sorts of stuff. Just imagine right at the moment with Afghanistan, what the Afghani people in our community are going through. In there, one young man or woman's going to write some book that involves the family, that has a theme through it or whatever. So you know, I think the great thing about Westwords is that it's putting a fire underneath a fabulous area of Sydney, where an immensely vital area of Sydney. You know, you go out to any of those suburbs in Sydney, you know, if I go into Bankstown, that I used to know very well, I go into Bankstown Centre Air where the library is and everything. My God, there's a lady in a Geab in a Burke or something driving a four-wheel drive. There's a bloody tradie with his t-shirt off getting a suntan. There's a Chinese person eating fish and chips. I mean, it's just, but it's vital. You can just feel the crinkling going on there. a bit different to a few other, well-known suburbs around Sydney that are more affluent. So there's stuff to be got out of that. There's great art to be got out of that. So I'm appreciative that Westwords is out there and doing such a job in it. They've got this thing called Booktopia coming on where, it's about people reading as many books as they can. And it's a bit like, doing a running thing from, like I'm going to run 1,000 Ks in a month. Who wants to, give me $1 for every 1,000? I would say you back someone. So here it's probably like, I intend to read, 10 books in the month. Well, who's prepared to give me $1 a book? And that money goes to, and I'll read the 10, and that goes to Westwords to help with their program. So that's what Booktober is.
Fantastic. What's next for you?
Well, I'm actually in quarantine here in Brisbane, and I actually get out tomorrow. And then next week I start shooting an 8-hour series called Darby and Joan through Queensland, and that'll take me up until early December. Yeah.
Bryan Brown, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. And you can order Sweet Jimmy right now at booktopia.com.au.
Thanks very much, mate. Lovely to talk to you.
You too.